Dear listeners, thank you for supporting us with your subscription. Enjoy watching. On a rainy gray day in the fall, a deer rode through town. Very topical lines. Right on the money, true, it's late night instead of day, and it's spring instead of fall, but it doesn't change the point. How long have they been together? Almost a year. All that time my wife pretended lied to me, lived on two families, and in the end married her lover. Well, Sveka, the landscape designer. Apparently, Pavel liked my wife's landscaping so much so that he's going to marry her. I wonder if he knows that his girlfriend is married with a child. I thought about my daughter and my heart ached. What will happen to Danielle? How will she survive all this? These thoughts made my head hurt. Okay. Enough of the snot. What happened is what happened. We must solve problems as they arise. Barely had I crossed the threshold of my apartment as the cell phone beeped. Dima? My wife's voice brought me back to reality. Are you home? I was silent. Hello? Dima. My wife was already shouting. Can you hear me? Don't yell. I can hear you. I tried to speak quietly. Dima, we need to talk. Can I come in the morning? Sweeta's voice had a begging tone. I turned off the phone. Come, sweeter, we'll talk. About what? About her lies, about duplicity, about betrayal. I honestly did not understand why it all came out that way. What was she missing? All these years I loved her, maybe not the hysterical, fake love, but the real with sincere feelings, which is alien to show off and play for the audience. Where did I make a mistake? How did I offend my wife? After all, Svetlana was not denied anything. Despite the fact that we did not have a lot of money, I did everything to my beloved in what did not need. Yes. And she understood it. At least it seemed so to me. I remembered how Svarita persuaded me to have another child, say Genoa at some point may be alone because we are not eternal. We discussed the pros and cons for a long time, and we came to the conclusion that the second child is necessary. And at the same time, my wife was cheating with another man. I had a terrible headache. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was thundering, periodically sinking down somewhere. I wanted to call my daughter, but I realized in time it was late. Why rouse the child? All right. We'll live till morning. I hardly slept that night. My heart felt in my throat and in my stomach, and I even thought of calling an ambulance. But then I decided that I would survive it. Around 9 in the morning, I heard the click of clicker front door and realized that Sviator had arrived. I know what I did was mean, but I had fallen in love for real. My wife began her monologue. I can't help it. This feeling is stronger than me. I listened to her in silence and looked out of the window. It was snowing, which was quite typical for the beginning of March. Large snowflakes were beating against the window, like frozen butterflies, trying to make their way to the warmth. It smelled cold, and I stood up and closed the window. I had made up my mind. Trying to win her back to fight for my love for my family, but I couldn't imagine us together anymore. At some point, I suddenly realized that Sweta was just unpleasant to me. Live with a cheating, betrayed you woman. It's almost the same as licking an ashtray with someone else's butts. I even shuddered in disgust. You've done so much for me, for our family. I appreciate it, but I cannot help it. Svetlana continued her monologue. I got the impression that she had memorized these common phrases. Sweta, do not waste your time. I all understood about love and that it is stronger than you. I interrupted her outpouring. I just have one question. What about Danielle? Will you take her to her new father? Svetlana was silent, then looked at me pitifully. I would like that Kenya would stay with you. We are going with Pasha to Italy. He has a villa there, and she has a school here, her friends. I would not want to disrupt her place. Let her finish school. Sweta lowered her eye so as not to meet me. Everything is clear. Beloved is not burning desire to see another man's child near him. And for the sake of this jerk to give up his own daughter, Ace Veta, What passion does to a man. Just yesterday, you were a loving mother and model wife. Okay, husband, a stranger, in fact, a potential enemy as some loving wives say. But your daughter, your own blood, how can you do this to her? Are you going to pick up your things? I realized it was time to end the conversation. No. I want to start my life all over again, leaving nothing behind. Wow. How beautifully said. Apparently, I and my daughter are also in the category of old things. Well, fair wind. They separated us quickly without asking too many questions. Leaving the court building and seeing as my ex-wife kissed her pasha and sat down in the car, I thought that at that moment, I was losing a part of my soul. Sad. General calmly, without any emotion, perceived the departure of mother to another man. I expected hysterics, crying, some kind of lamentation, but she just looked at me with eyes full of tears and said, "Daddy, I ask only one thing. Let us remember it for the rest of our lives that we will never forgive her." That same evening, my daughter collected all of our family photos with Svetlana in the house and threw them down the garbage chute. 2 years passed. I quit my job and devoted myself completely to the club. My idea of vintage rock and roll paid off. In half a year, the club was already making money. I took Natasha, a pretty young woman just over 30 with good business acumen, as an administrator. After a while, she suggested inviting to us the famous rock bands of the past. But here, there was a problem. Our room was small and could not accommodate all comers. I thought about the pros and cons and decided to buy the whole building where the club was. On the first floor to make a decent concert hall, and in the basement to open a restaurant with a small stage on which to perform myself. I took a loan from a bank and invested the money I had saved in 6 months to implement my decision. Soon my home collection of vintage guitars moved into the club, giving the interior a proper vintage feel. On the second floor, I was going to make a small office and a studio apartment for myself. I intended to give my apartment to my daughter. Anyway, things got going. And in 3 months, the renovated Bronze Club opened its doors to lovers of vintage rock and roll. Gradually, the pain of my wife's betrayal dulled and the time came when I stopped remembering Sveriter. I was no longer interested in where she was or what happened to her. I tried to enjoy the seemingly insignificant things. A long time ago, as a child, my mother had insured me for $500 until I came of age. And when it was time to get insurance, my mother told me that I could buy whatever I wanted. At that time, my deepest desire was to play in an ensemble. But alas, I had no instrument and nobody wanted to take a guitar player without a guitar. Naturally, I wanted a guitar. My mom and I went to a department store and I bought an electric guitar. That's where my career as a musician began. Then I had all kinds of instruments, but I cherished my first guitar very much. But alas, it got lost in time, and when I tried to find it, it had disappeared. I searched my parents' apartment but couldn't find it. One day, my father called me and told me there was an old guitar in the garage and what he should do with it. Half an hour later, I was at his place. It was the guitar. My first mom's guitar. I felt dizzy with joy. I went back to the club, plugged it into the amp, and it started playing. If you want something badly enough, eventually the wish will come true. I put my first guitar in my study so it would constantly remind me of my youth and the beginning of my musical career. Unnoticeably, summer came. Genia went to a youth camp for 2 weeks, then she and I decided to go to the sea. My daughter grew up and became a charming girl. Many guys turned their heads when we walked around town with her. I do not hide. It was nice to me as a father, but deep in my heart, I felt jealousy and sadness. That the time will come and my daughter will leave me. The laws of nature are inexorable. While Genoa was away, I moved into the club and made my new home. Things were going well. The administrator Natasha coped with his duties well. But I began to notice that her attitude toward me had changed. She was seriously interested in my person. This was evident in everything. First of all, she became friends with Yanni. My daughter often came to the club to talk to Natasha. In the mornings, I was served natural coffee with homemade pastries. As I found out later, Natasha bought a coffee machine with her own money. And finally, homemade cutlets appeared in my diet. I used to think that number one, but my mother knows how to make burgers. But I was wrong. Cutlets that Natasha treated me were a masterpiece of culinary art. Yes. Time goes on, but the techniques of seducing men does not change. The weight of their heart of steel is through their stomachs. And Natasha made excellent use of this timeless feminine device. She took her time. She did not impose her society on me. She did not bore me with her talk, but I felt that I was getting more and more sucked in by the swamp of comfort Natasha was creating. One warm summer evening, I spent some time in my office. There was no hurry. The apartment was only 5 meters away. I had planned to have a drink the morning before, and the whole day was filled with anticipation of this important event for any man. I poured half a glass of amber drink and suddenly thought about Sweta. Just thought. Her current life was indifferent to me. It was just a thought, and I immediately forgot about her. But no sooner had I enjoyed the single malt than the cell phone beeped intrusively. Honestly, I wanted to throw it against the wall. But I overcame myself and answered the phone. Hello? There was silence on the phone, but I heard someone's breathing. Hello, speak. Dima. The woman's voice was very familiar. Sveta. I'm listening. Go ahead. I managed to take a sip of whiskey that I was in anticipation all day for nothing. Dima, just do not hang up. I really need to meet you. Can I come over? Svetlana's voice was quiet. Ingratiating, begging. Do you want to go right now? Yes. I'm begging you. Okay. Come over. I'm at the club now. My ex-wife appeared in all her glory. Modest but insanely expensive dress, flesh-colored stockings, shoes on stilettos, smoky glasses, half face, and completed this mind-blowing outfit hat. Sweta seemed like a model come off the cover of a glamorous magazine, except that her face didn't look happy. She sat across from me with her head down, expressing humility and obedience. Dima, I know it's unforgivable. And yet I ask you to forgive me. There wasn't a single day that I didn't think about you. Her eyes began to fill with tears. I have done a terrible thing. I betrayed you, our family, our daughter. She told me that the love craze wasn't long enough. Her Pasha had a new fling much younger than Sveriter. Pasha lived with 2 families for a while and then offered to let Sveta move out. True, he provided with some money. Sweta was upset, but not for long. She has a new admirer. An Italian, the owner of the gas station. A mad passion flared up between them, and it seemed to Sweeter that it would last forever. It did, in fact, go on forever. For a whole month until Sveriter ran out of money, but she wasn't upset. The gas station wasn't a bad income either. But then it turned out that her Italian had no desire at all to support the beauty at his own expense. These foreigners are very greedy. So once again, Sweta was asked to vacate her apartment. And then, Sweta remembered that she had a husband and a daughter. Not strangers at all. She somehow scraped together the money for a ticket, and here she was to be reunited with her family. She continued to speak while I stared in silence at my once beloved woman. The woman who cynically betrayed me without hesitation. The woman who had lied to me for a year, living with me and lover. The woman who had cut me in Genoa out of her life and left me for another man. And now she has come to her senses and wants to come back to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She kept repeating that word. And I looked at her bright lipstick-painted mouth, which delighted my ears with such sweet words, and I imagined her kissing and caressing her lovers with it. She didn't care so much about my feelings that she didn't hesitate to tell me about her Italian love adventures, not giving a second thought to how she was killing me with her words. Did Sweta really think that I would believe her words for even a second? That she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted. 2 years ago, she found an excuse for her meanness and left me and her daughter without hesitation. And now she is here, not because she really realized that she loves her family, but because she understands that now she has number one to provide for her financially. After realizing all this, Sweeta came to me hoping to try to get back what was lost. Do I seem to her so stupid, ready to believe her lies? I remembered the words of Junior 2 years ago. Daddy, I only ask you one thing. Let us remember this for life, that we will never forgive her. Sweeta. I interrupted her heart-rending monologue. You're an adult and chose your own path. You cannot step into the same river twice. I forgave you long ago, but I have my own life in which there is no place for you. I stood up, showing that the conversation was over. Goodbye and try to be happy. Sweeta left holding a handkerchief to her eyes. The scent of her perfume wafted through the office for some time. I finished my whiskey, put on my jacket, and headed for the door. It was time to open the club. It was rock and roll time. Dear listeners, please like and subscribe to